Hello everyone and welcome to another Scots Whay podcast, and today I am joined by singer and songmaker Kirsty Law. Hello Kirsty.
Hello.
So there's so much to talk to you about, but let's start with your latest venture, which is Helm Arts. Could you talk a little bit about Helm?
Yes, so as you've introduced me there, I am a singer and a songmaker, performer. However, I also have a bunch of other kind of skills in my bag, and that's what I've kind of all brought together to bring into this new sort of artist support and production company, Helm Arts. So Helm Arts is there to provide one-to-one support for artists of all different kinds, primarily in Scotland, on a sort of temporary basis where they don't need to be tied to a manager or an agent or some kind of promoter. There's various different kinds of help that I can offer. And I basically came up with the idea because I was doing bits and pieces of that work myself anyway and seeing it really just as a kind of side hustle, but I really started to notice how much I enjoy facilitating other people's great project ideas. I love helping people out with their projects and sort of being able to bang on about how brilliant someone is that isn't trying to promote my own work. So that really was the beginning of the germ of that idea. So there's three strands to Helm. There's artist support, project production, and arts curation, which is a bit more of a sort of a creative influence in some of the projects.
Before we go into the different strands, do you find it easier kind of talking and promoting other people's work than your own?
Oh, of course. Yes, so much easier. You don't have the and I think that's almost like what part of getting somebody like me to help an artist with their work. It's not because that artist doesn't have the vast amount of skills that they could possibly use to promote their work, to do all of this, but oftentimes the capability to have that the kind of capacity that is needed for all of the different skills that you need to try and embody at once to, say, put a project out into the world, whether it's an album or an exhibition or a theatre performance, whatever. Trying to embody all of those skills at once is really hard, and also the emotional background that you have with your creative work makes you vulnerable. So having another person on your side who can add extra skills and extra knowledge to the table is great, but also just to be another pair of hands, another set of ears, eyes, and to be on your side is kind of, is invaluable. And it's something that I kind of have felt the need for before. So it's something that I thought maybe other people might feel the need for as well. And it's something I knew I'd enjoy doing.
Because I presume these are things which you have found over your career, you've either missed out on or could have helped. What have been the most challenging aspects through your career in terms of being supported or of needing support?
So a lot of it comes with the fact that people talk about kind of like the industry standard or trying to fit into the particular industry that you're in, but it's quite tricky, that, because the whole point of being creative and making new work is that you're responding sort of in this immediate way to the times that you're in, and every single project and artist is different. And so trying to find your way, you create this work which is totally individual to you, and trying to find your way through a scene if your work isn't going on the path that somebody else has already trodden can be tricky. And if, you know, essentially you're first and foremost the artist, so trying to then become a promoter and all of that stuff as well, a sort of publicist or some kind of agent, is not necessarily, you know, that's not your first instrument. That's not your first, you know, that's not your main skill set. And trying to get yourself then into that headspace, that's what I found tricky in the past personally. And over the years, I've got a lot better at it. And I did notice as well, there was things about the promotional side of things, or the sort of making tours happen, putting things on, that especially when I was working with collaborators, and I could feel like I was making it happen for everyone, that started to feel a bit more exciting. And I started to notice there was elements of this that I did enjoy, and that maybe I could help other people with who I knew hated it, because I do have a lot of friends who have struggled with those elements more than I have.
Yeah. It's one of these things that seems to almost pull in different directions with the arts, because as you say, sometimes you have to fit in, where actually a lot of art is about people who don't fit in, or find, you know, things that aren't conformist. And
yeah,
also,
exactly.
You know, applying for funding, and you have to try and fit into the criteria of funding. It's something, again, seems to pull against an artistic creation. Is that right?
Yeah, I think you've got it bang on there. And I think that another part of it is, if you imagine, like, when you're, one of the most kind of tricky points, and a lot of the points that I've sort of helped people with, and it's not necessarily always in a specific role, it's kind of tends to be more of a general all-around role, but it's that moment where you've made your work, and then you're trying to put it out into the world, and you're trying to plan how you might do that and figure out where it's going to go. And if you think about that moment that you're trying to release that work, it's the moment at which you're almost most vulnerable. You've got this thing which essentially your artistic baby, and you're trying to push it out into the world and go, here it is. And that feels very vulnerable. And at the same time, you're having to put this shiny face on and go, here I am, everyone, come and get it. And put on this kind of performance face of, like, telling everyone that you're brilliant and that they should want to listen to, see, hear your work. It's, you have to be incredibly sort of galvanized whilst also feeling very vulnerable. And it's that really messes with a lot of people's heads, and quite understandably.
No, absolutely. I mean, nobody wants to hear anything bad said about their baby, understandably.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, to continue the metaphor.
Yes, exactly. So you mentioned there about collaboration, and a lot of what you've done, at least the stuff that I know you for best, has been through collaboration. You've maybe touched on it a bit already, but what is it about working with other musicians, other artists? I mean, you've done kind of multi-artistic presentations. What is it about that which really kind of fires your enthusiasm?
So I've been working collaboratively since I was about 18 or 19 with artists from different disciplines. Crucially, that's always been something that no matter what I've been doing, I've enjoyed working with artists of different disciplines. So whether that's like painters or dancers or authors, storytellers, and as well, obviously, as other musicians. And I've done that in a lot of sort of different capacities, whether I've been the kind of the musical one in an art exhibition, or putting a show together kind of equally with an author and another musician. And I find it really enriching to what I do. It provides you with so many different kind of perspectives on your creative work, but also it kind of allows you to realize that all of these mediums, they're all just forms of expression trying to do the same thing in different ways. And when you can find a connectedness between different mediums, you can allow each medium to say the things that they're best at saying, and have that all kind of in one place. That's really exciting. And yeah, I guess I really when I started doing this kind of work, it was quite a natural thing for me to do, because it's something that my mother has always done. She's a visual artist, and one of the main things in her practice has been working with artists of different mediums. So I mean, I really grew up kind of learning that as an almost creative language, and I'm so thankful for that. And so yeah, growing up kind of with my mother, Pat Law, as a visual artist, and helping her install exhibitions, and seeing her work with musicians and storytellers and things, that really was inspiring, but also informative, in that it didn't really occur to me that it might be a slightly kind of unusual thing to do. And it always seemed like a perfectly natural thing to do. So yeah, that really kind of got me on the road for that, and it's something I've never stopped doing since, right up to Young Night Thought, which is the project that, of course, you've seen me perform, and that I did at the Fringe last year.
It's interesting what you're saying. That I wonder if, because you were almost brought up with that idea that everything's accessible in that way, perhaps other musicians or other artists, go, well, I don't know anything about film, so I'm not going to go in, be involved there, or I'm not going to be involved with writers because I don't really, I'm not really interested in that. Well, actually, you didn't have those barriers. It just seemed like a natural thing to kind of ask anyone to. Do you have something you can?
Yeah. So I had that. Yeah, the idea that it was all just different types of expression, and that all of these things could be linked, was certainly introduced. But also, I had the privilege to grow up around a lot of creative people, and to be encouraged in my creative endeavors. And I was always a very visual person anyway. So also just like I had a certain familiarity with lots of different art forms, and that familiarity that has then built up through working with people from different disciplines, I think, is something that has made sense when it's come to forming Helm now, is that I can work in this cross-discipline way.
Yeah.
And one of the first kind of proper projects I'm working on with Helm is a multi-discipline arts project that I'm helping to kind of promote and find venues for. So a project called Exposure by Giles Perring and Andy Metcalf, to artists and, multidisciplinary artists. But that's going to be really exciting.
Because it did seem to me when I was reading about Helm, it's that this almost seems the natural extension of the collaboration you've done previously. It's like the things you've learned in working on things like your Night Team and Piano Drome and Reclaiming Sounds, and that you've got the experience there now, and it's almost like, well, now I can perhaps pass this on to other people who maybe don't have the not enthusiasm is the wrong word, but the knowledge in those fields that you can kind of spread your introducing perhaps as well, that aspect to it.
Yeah, I mean, so for instance, with this new project, Exposure, it's a visual art installation exhibition, which involves sound and can potentially have a performance element. It's a really beautiful project that looks at the kind of brutality of landscape and vulnerability of human nature, and the relationship between that. And sound artist and photographer Giles Perring and painter filmmaker Andy Metcalf have kind of come together on this and made it principally on the Isle of Jura, right. And are looking to take this kind of installation, which involves lots of different elements, to different venues. And it's been really interesting for me to look at just the broad spectrum of different types of venues that this installation could inhabit, because it's got lots of different facets to it. And Young Night Thought was very like that. Young Night Thought was like Exposure, it was modular, different facets to it. It had performance to it, but it was also visual. So with Young Night Thought, once we took it to Alchemy Film Festival, which is an amazing film festival in the Borders in Hawick, and it gets filmmakers from all over the world to show their kind of art films there in Hawick, which is fantastic. It was started by Richard Ashbrown, and so I was invited there to show mainly the film of Young Night Thought that was made by Daniel Warren, and then Esther Swift, the harpist that I play with, myself and her did a kind of shorter duo set that went with that. So it kind of, there was lots of different formations that Young Night Thought could take on, and that's something that this project Exposure can also do. It can go to different places in different ways, and so I was able to kind of have that knowledge of the kind of the spectrum of different venues and festivals and things. So we're currently looking to put that exhibition kind of, I suppose, out for grabs from spring 2021, and so much of what I've learned in these previous collaborative projects has allowed me to have the connections and the knowledge of what is here in Scotland for amazing venues, grassroots to more established ones, to do that.
Because I guess, you know, someone might be starting out and has an idea of, oh, I'd really like to have something with some visuals or some dance, as you say, something like that, but has no idea where to begin to make those connections.
Yeah, I mean, I don't make any. I'm quite conscious that my role is not to make creative decisions for anybody, because that's part of respecting their sort of artistic practice. So, but if, for instance, you know, a musician has included visual elements in their project, but they're not used to promoting to places that are for visual work, and that they are now spaces that are actually open to them, that's something that I could help them with, you know. And I guess for me it's about joining the dots. That's a phrase that I think of quite a lot. It's about joining the dots for people, just like connecting people up to other folk. It's about doing kind of working with people one-to-one in a way that is sympathetic to their work, their practice, their whatever the project is, which is something that, you know, Creative Scotland, they're brilliant and they really do their best, but what they can offer sometimes in the way of support has to be slightly standardized, because they're representing for the whole country, and that's absolutely fair enough. And I think the way that they adapt has been really good, but I think sometimes it's nice to be able to get some, like, if you need a little bit of help, it's nice to be able to get something that is just looking at your project, and isn't trying to cater to lots of different people.
Well, talking about the projects that you have worked on previously, it seems to me that often there's a sense of permanence or maybe even legacy involved in them, that it's not just for one night only and then you move on to something else. There's a kind of often an educational feel to them, or something that has more than beyond a single performance. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, well, I'm delighted to hear it. I'm really glad to hear that they have some kind of legacy, because that is the general idea of whenever I've been working on anything. It's because I want to be part of a cultural conversation. It's because I want to be like part of the cultural dialogue of what's going on, particularly in Scotland, but kind of in whatever picture it's relevant to around me. And that is very important to me. And so often the themes of my work will come from that, but also the way in which the work makes its way out into the world. So with Young Night Thought, there was kind of mutually beneficial workshops that happened with kids. So Young Night Thought played around with the concept of the inner child through a lens of Scottish folklore, song, film, and artwork. And so using all of these different disciplines to look at different facets of that. And as part of our kind of exploration, we ran some workshops for kids, allowing them to play around with sounds and their own recordings, and got them to share with us the songs that they liked to sing, the things that they liked, from everything from like clapping games in the playground to any poems that they'd felt like they'd learned off by heart, or and it was really great to do that, and it really was kind of mutually beneficial. It was definitely something that informed the project and wasn't just something we were kind of offering the community solely. I mean, it really kind of paid back into what we did as well, which was a really nice kind of exchange, I think.
I mean, it seemed like a project which was almost always changing because of that conversation between the people on stage, or the people involved, and the people that you were viewing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Young Night Thought got the opportunity to really just keep evolving, which was brilliant, and getting the opportunity to be part of the Made in Scotland programme at the Fringe Festival last year really gave us the chance to do that, because we could bring on board Emma Snellgrove, who's an incredible dancer, and she just created these dances that were so sympathetic to the project, and she created 3 dances to 3 of the songs, and where we performed them in the Piano Dome. And to be able to take a project that got its original funding to just happen at all at the end of 2016 to then still be evolving it and performing it in 2019 was just brilliant. And yeah, I still, perform those songs in my repertoire when we're allowed to gig.
Of course. You mentioned Piano Dome there, and I believe you're involved in that as well. For anyone who doesn't know, it's because it's an amazing thing.
Oh, it's brilliant. So the Piano Dome, I've been kind of lightly involved in the Piano Dome in a couple of ways. I did a residency when they were like trying to raise the funds to make it. The part of what they did there was they had different residencies, and I did one of them in Inverleith House, and then after that I started talking to them a lot about kind of what they were doing. Did they need a hand kind of doing some social media things? And so I started helping with a bit of their kind of social media side and their marketing, which I really enjoy, because it's really enjoyable when it's a project you believe in. And so the Piano Dome is a 100-seat amphitheatre made entirely out of unwanted pianos that would have gone on the skip, pianos that would have been burned, and right down to the screws that they used to put the thing together. It's all recycled out of, or upcycled certainly, out of these old pianos. And it's this beautiful amphitheatre made by Tim Vincent Smith and Matthew Wright, and it's an incredible place to play. It's an incredible place to go and see live music or performance, and it has 5 inbuilt pianos to the actual amphitheatre that are in working order and get used in the performances. That also makes it just a sort of living installation. So when the performance stops, the audience kind of come down the stairs, and then people start to play around on the pianos that are built into the seating that they've just been sitting on. It has an amazing way of working with its own audience, and it feels like really builds a sense of community. They're currently trying to find and raise funds for a permanent home for the Piano Dome, and I'm not sure where their kind of fundraising is. That they were doing a Kickstarter at one point, but it might be over. But if people do keep an eye out for that, it's certainly a completely invaluable venue to have around.
It's the closest I've ever been to almost like being in a living, breathing space. Like you could feel that there's sounds and there's, feel of it, and you think, this could shift a little bit at any time, just the way it's It's
Yeah.
it's a magical place, definitely. So can you tell us a little bit about your own career, right from your kind of early interest?
Yeah. Sure thing. So I'm a folk singer. That's essentially it. I'm like a folk singer plus other stuff when I fancy it. But essentially, I'm a folk singer, and I'm a total geek when it comes to traditional ballads, unaccompanied singing, Scots songs. And that is actually, so I kind of had this background being brought up by a contemporary visual artist, but parents that also really liked listening to folk music. And so I started to hear it, and I really started liking the stories that I was hearing in those songs. My sister's actually, she's become a photographer as well, so all quite kind of creative. She has an amazing little business up on the Isle of Lewis called Island Darkroom, where she does analog photography. So that was kind of our creative background. And then, but I really latched on to the folk singing. People like Karine Polwart have been a huge influence on me, and so I would listen to her CDs and things when I was growing up, so it was a real treat. And Young Night thought, she's now a good friend, and we wrote a song together for that album called Underneath the Sycamore. So to be able to collaborate with her in her songwriting was such an amazing treat. And I went, so she was kind of almost like an early mentor when I was a teenager, and then I went to university and I studied folk and traditional music at Newcastle University for 4 years. That was 10 tons of fun. That was great. Yeah, just wall to wall tunes and songs for 4 years. The people that you lived with played tunes, sang songs, and then you went out at night and you played tunes and you sang songs, and then you got up in the morning and you went to university and you played tunes and you sang songs. And so that was an immersion in folk and traditional music, and it was really brilliant. Made a lot of lifelong friends from that, and many other musicians on the folk scene have come out of that course.
Right.
But much as I loved living in Newcastle, I particularly was still singing in Scots, was drawn to the Scots traditions, and I wanted to come back up to Scotland, and so I live in Edinburgh now. And I also, even at university, was still kind of in my free time doing things with other artists of different disciplines. One project that I did whilst I was at university was when I was 19. I started doing a project called Ars Navigare, which is a Latin for art on the sea, or art navigation, and that was a sort of, I don't know if it was so much collaborative, but it was a shared experience, on a Finnish tall ship sailing from Cherbourg to Kiel through the North Sea, many Finnish artists and Scottish artists. And then later we had mainly a visual art exhibition in Turku in Finland, where I did actually produce a little kind of piece of visual art, but the main part of it was a sound, a song, a kind of soundscape made up of a Robert Louis Stevenson poem, because I'm a bit of a broken record when it comes to him, and a Finnish song that one of the women had sung to me on the boat, and I'd recorded her singing it. So I sort of weaved those two things together. So that was kind of the beginning of that, and I really just kind of went from there. And as soon as I'd finished university, I just kept plugging away at the music, doing working odd jobs to try and support myself. I worked in the amazing Coda Music record shop that was on the Mound in Edinburgh, and shut almost 2 years ago. So I worked there on and off for almost 7 years, which is incredible to think. And so gained like so much knowledge of just like what was coming out constantly. I heard every single album that was coming out that came through the doors. It was brilliant. And so just in terms of getting a feel for the scene,
Yeah.
And yeah, I've just been doing kind of projects with artists, writers, storytellers, visual artists, and things ever since. As well as just kind of writing my own stuff and writing a lot of stuff in Scots. Excuse me. That's always been really important to me, and writing a lot of new, and now I write a lot of kind of new songs in Scots, right, from perspectives that I feel I can't find in the tradition. Right. So for instance, from kind of empowered women, particularly sexually empowered women, queer standpoints. They're all things that I personally can't find in the tradition, because they're things that you couldn't be explicit about in the old days. And so I think it's really important to keep writing these kinds of songs. They don't always come out sounding like traditional songs, but that's okay. Mm-hmm. And it's important to me that that language is not only restricted to old narratives, because it's a living, breathing language that we all speak in. Sure. And but when it comes to songs and poems and things, not less so poems actually now in Scotland, there's some brilliant contemporary Scots poetry. But when it comes to the aesthetic of singing in Scots, it's so often related to traditional narratives, pastoral narratives, and yeah, lots of things that don't always encapsulate the experience of a contemporary life. So I try to fill in some of the gaps for myself, really, that of my own experience that I wasn't getting from traditional songs.
It sounds like, particularly the early part, was like a living musical you were in. I've just got this at university, and everyone's singing songs, and then on a tall ship where other people are singing songs.
Yeah. Well, I try to keep it interesting, Ali. I try to keep it interesting.
Brilliant. But what you're saying about traditional music is fascinating, I think, because it seems to me that Scottish, and I'm using inverted commas here, traditional music is in a healthy place at the moment and developing in new ways. Is that something that you agree with?
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh no, I definitely agree with that. I mean, and you know, you've got so many young people doing interesting things with traditional music. I think it's always really important that it's nurtured in the right way, and that those and that the really interesting types of musicians who are trying to sort of push the narrative a little bit, introduce unusual or not quite heard before types of music, that, you know, it's really important that that's nurtured. And I think that that's something that you do with your radio show and your podcast, and I really have enjoyed listening to your radio show and your podcast before. And I think I think there's always a danger. I think that with, in some ways, as Scotland as a whole, we have, for instance, a huge tourist industry, which we, of course, on the one hand, have to be very thankful for. As a folk scene, we can be very, I suppose, sort of in danger of playing into the tourist industry before we remember kind of just like catering to our audiences that live here, the music that's being brought out, which might not immediately be the most obvious choices for festivals and things like that, who are mainly catering to tourists. So these festivals and things, absolutely, they showcase great music. Don't get me wrong, I'm not slighting any of the music that gets shown there. But because the tourist industry in Scotland is so big, there's a balancing act that I think does need to be just kept an eye on. There's otherwise we might be in danger of kind of losing out on some of the really great musicians who I think can be given platforms.
It's interesting because when I was younger, I mean, there wasn't a lot of folk music in general. You maybe had it at home and stuff like that, but I think you had to go and seek it out. And in terms of like the ballad tradition, I didn't really know about that till I was at university, and I learnt that through literature more than music. But it does seem that it's now being, reclaim's the wrong word, but at least it's more available to people who maybe want to go and discover it for themselves. And almost that leads you to a more modern look at the traditional.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, so there is no doubt about it. The courses offered in Glasgow, the university courses in Glasgow, there's Scottish music at the Conservatoire, the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, or the RSMD as it was called, when that course started up, and the course that I went on in Newcastle, these courses have absolutely created this whole generation of people who are now informed about these old song texts, collections of tunes. Not to say that there weren't people at all that weren't relating to all of this old material and doing great things with it, but what these courses have allowed to happen is they've created jobs for the people who have this incredible information to pass on, but they also like create a volume of people to in a younger generation to start really kind of taking this music and taking it to exciting places and just to keep it in the tradition in the exciting way that it always was. So yeah, I think that they have really positively fed this kind of stream of people that would have been interested in that kind of music were they exposed to it. So it's allowed them to be exposed to that even more.
It's a real example of how arts and education is absolutely vital for all sorts of reasons. But
absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're talking about our heritage and our culture. It's and it makes it so strong.
Absolutely, Kirsty. It's been an absolute delight to talk to you. I could chat for the whole of the evening, but it really has.
Likewise.
Thanks very much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's been a total delight. And yeah, really nice to talk about kind of my new project, my new venture, and let people know about that. Yeah, if anyone wants to look up any more about it, I've got a website which is www.helmarts.scot.
And we will put all the necessary links as well for people who are interested.
Thank you.
On the website. And we will be back very soon with someone completely different. Cheers.